The next part is the most exciting part. We have a VC panel looking in the crystal ball, trying to move forward and say, what comes next? And I'd like to welcome the panel members. So as they sit down, to my left is Abhijit Supekar, or Abhi. Abhi is a supply chain professional. He spent years at Google, Skydio, and currently is at Lucid Motors. Further down to his left is Anshu Agarwal. She is a very accomplished entrepreneur, had like 4 or 5 exits, and has now floated her own VC company. To her left is Rohini. She is a fairly experienced supply chain VC, has years and years of experience in that area. And finally, we have Gayathri Radhakrishnan, who used to be at Micron earlier and now is at Hitachi Ventures. So, Abhi, take it away.
So my name is Abhijit Supekar, and I head strategic sourcing for custom electronics at Lucid Motors. As one of the principles of driving supply chain strategy in the consumer electronics world for 10 years and now in the automotive sector, I've seen the not so smart systems to go to fairly smart systems as we have talked so far. And there is a whole new world that we still haven't yet explored, and which is where the panel today is going to talk about. But briefly speaking, I would I want to share what a little small story. When I started in supply chain, looking at pricing, everybody, that's one thing that comes to mind. And we were looking at discrete data sets, trying to analyze, put some magic behind it, and go and negotiate that out. But little those spreadsheets, just connecting them has given a different perspective in negotiations. Same goes for smart manufacturing, same goes for smart factories. And to that end, this is all about what we have come from the past to now. And today's question is what the future holds for us. And that's why we have the amazing panel here. So to start with, we'll start with Anshu with the first question. Could you please tell us what are the investment trends for 2024 from your perspective? And what is that theme going to change like, and what drivers would be for the next 5 years?
I think I want to first acknowledge that the world has changed. First of all, we are 3 women talking about manufacturing. How cool and sexy is that? I really wanted to acknowledge that fact because I don't think I have seen it in my career for so long. All right, so the question was, what are the trends that we're seeing? Obviously, the trends, we are seeing the trends because of AI. And AI is just changing. It's part of the stack. It's part of the stack for everything. So in case of the convergence of AI and robotics, I think it's like the biggest trend I am seeing that's going to change the world. So what we saw is only in the technology sector. I mean, every software company developing agents and agents for sales, marketing, I mean, name it, there are co-pilots and agents for everything. But we haven't even scratched the surface. There are trillion-dollar industries, whether it's manufacturing, construction, mining, name it. All of these industries are going to be disrupted. And this disruption is happening because of convergence of IoT, robotics, and AI. And that is definitely going to change everything that we do around ourselves.
Awesome. Thank you, Anshu. We'll move to the next person here, and would love for you to understand your perspective of the investments that you are making today and the trends and drivers for yourself as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to see you all, and great talks, Preet, and the panel before. Really enjoyed the conversation. So just by way of background, I've been a venture investor for a long time, since '99 actually, enterprise investing, but for most of that time it was, as I think back to it, it's an enterprise infrastructure, but a lot of it was in the front half of the enterprise. So over the last several years, I've kind of gotten very interested in the back half of enterprise. And what I mean by that is that If you look at even the cloud trend, just the cloud innovation rail, it created $1 trillion of software value. So think about Salesforce, ServiceNow, Workday, these types of large new software companies, as well as infrastructure software like MongoDB, Datadog, and so on. Just focusing on that front half of the enterprise. But if you look at the back half of the enterprise, it for the most part runs a lot of very old software, very good software, but much of the software was initially written 30 years ago. SAP, JDA, Manugistics, i2, Manhattan Associates, like these are large, big pieces of software, not to mention ANSYS and so on, which are specialized and they were written for purpose, but they were written before there was cloud, before there was AI, before there was even GPS or e-commerce, the many, many trends that have happened since the invention of that software. So our thesis, so I have a new venture firm called NewBuild Venture Capital. We started about 1.5 years ago. We're focused entirely on that back half of enterprise. And the thesis is that if you see the innovation rails that Anshu mentioned, you look at AI, of course, is a big trend, but data, API-based data is still relatively not present. Even the cloud journey is only partway underway within the back half of enterprise. We think those things are going to create at least an equivalent of what has happened in the front half of enterprise. So $1 trillion of software value that'll come out of the back half of enterprise. And so that's the crystal ball. It's not just for 2020, it won't happen in 2024. It's like, this is going to be our journey for the next decade or two. But that's our informing philosophy, and that's how we look at the world. Very happy to have this conversation.
Thank you, Rohini. That's a lot of money coming our way, I guess. Gayathri, would you please share your thoughts on where you are investing now, and what do you see the trends and drivers for the next 5 years, please?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Really excited to be here. So I'm with Hitachi Ventures, the corporate venture arm of Hitachi. As many of you may know, Hitachi is like a large industrial giant. We are a fund that's set up more like an independent, financially oriented VC, but what we try to do is we try to look for ways to add value to our portfolio companies by leveraging the power of Hitachi. So Hitachi is an $80 billion revenue company with, focus on multiple areas. I think from energy, we have Hitachi Energy, there's Hitachi Rail, where we actually build the carriages. Well, earlier, Preet was talking about metal forming and so on. They actually do that in factories, right? So, and then we have Hitachi Vantara right here down the street where they're building storage systems. And we also have services businesses, right? From Global Logic to Hitachi Digital Services and Hitachi Systems, Hitachi Solutions, and so on. So what we look at is basically areas like industrial is a big focus. We look at areas of digital transformation. So the intersection of OT and IT is very important for us. And we kind of invest across the spectrum in terms of stage, but sweet spot is Series A, Series B. But I'll allude to like two of the themes that came up in the conversations earlier. I think Preet, in his conversation, was talking about the future of the smart factories of the future. A quick journey about my personal past. I started in Corning, which is in the fiber optics division. Then most of my career was in software, and then being in the Valley as well, you hear things like software is eating the world and all of that. But guess what? Who has the largest market cap today? It's a hardware company, right? It's NVIDIA. So hardware is making a comeback, and there is a huge ecosystem that's powering the software on which the world runs today. We also heard why AI. This is the time for AI. That's because we have GPU. And I don't know, a big shout out to my previous employer, Micron. I don't know how many of you heard the keynote from Sumit yesterday. You probably saw that H200 die, where a big chunk of the H200 die is actually Micron's HBM memory cube. All that compute has to be driven by data from somewhere, and that data is stored in memory today, right? So, but all of this memory, GPUs, CPUs, compute, all aspects of our cars that we go on, which are going to be software-defined vehicles, but they're all built in factories, right? They're all, the power that we get, the transformers, and every part of it is built in a factory. And then we are looking at optimizing that, right? How can we create that next wave of the future? So we invested in a company that's actually, I don't know how many of you are also following Jan LeCun. He talks actually about how today's AI doesn't even have the same level of knowledge as a cat or a dog. The model parameters are way bigger than that of a cat's neurons, right? But it's an interesting analogy if you think about it. And it's not just about regurgitating what's on the online world, because the virtual world is only a small part of how we live. Today we are in this physical world. And how do you translate the knowledge that's in this physical world? So we actually invested in a company that's focused on building that physical AI. And then talking about smart manufacturing, smart factories, again, I go back to Preet's about, that all that forming to forging, drilling, welding. I didn't realize, to be honest, sitting in the software side, how complex these tasks were. And we all think, oh, robotics is going to take away everyone's job, but not really. I mean, they're not smart enough. I was talking to a startup that's doing cognitive robotics. We actually invested in them. And he was talking about how a company that's building jet fighters, the entire jet fighter is built handmade, right? Because the alignment is super important. Yep. And there's no automation there. So today's robotics don't have the brains to, it can drill a hole, but it needs to be aligned to another, hole in another metal sheet somewhere. And that level of precision is possible with robotics, but it doesn't have the brain to do so. How can we take it to the next level? So there's so much potential that's possible, and that's where, it gets very exciting for us.
Great, thank you, Gayathri. I think this is connecting to what Ritesh said earlier. This is why now is the hardware is available or getting there, the compute power is getting there, and having the brains to now starting building is going to be really important. So moving to the next one, I think, Gayathri, I'll start with you again, actually, because you talked about robotics and alignment of stuff, and would love to hear what AI, how do you see AI transforming the robotics and the drone industry specifically, and making the robots more smarter, I guess?
No, absolutely. I think that's where cognition is going to be a big part, right? I mean, we are seeing a big sort of investment wave in humanoid robotics, but I think that's only a piece of the puzzle. Because as you saw on the for warehouse robotics, last mile, and so on, I think humanoid robotics makes a lot of sense. But a lot of what was talked about on, say, the applied digital twin, applied twin, or what Preet was talking about the factory floor, that's like industrial robots. You don't need a walking machine, but you need an intelligent machine that can sense what's happening around it, right? There are cameras, there are sensors, there are tactile feedback that they can get, these machines can get, and they can do much more than what is possible today. And robotic languages, and with generative AI, I personally don't think that generative AI is the be-all and end-all. And as a VC, I've been a little jaded as well, because every company is now a generative AI company. But there's value for every part of AI in today's world. So there was a talk, I think from Applied, if I'm not mistaken, about the importance of physics-based models and data models, right? In the industrial segment, I think the importance is that intersection of physics-based models and data-based models. You're not going to get a ton of data. Every manufacturing floor has to operate at such high levels of efficiency that the negative side, like if a power outage, that's an anomaly. How do you get those anomalies? How can you train a model based on anomalies that happen very rarely, right? Mm-hmm. So data is not going to solve all your problem, but everything in the world is based on physics. Mm-hmm. So you know that there's something is not just possible, it cannot break the laws of physics. Right. So by combining the two, you can achieve more. Where I think generative AI helps is not everyone needs to be a programmer, not everyone needs to be a data analyst now. I can ask a simple question, so the user interface, I think, will change how you interact. Now I don't need to know 20 different robotic languages, right? I can just tell the robot what I want it to do, and maybe it'll just do it. Maybe there's some kind of human feedback where it just takes my input and then does it, right? From a robotic standpoint, I see that's where, I think a lot of semiconductor folks here, so you may realize, I've heard about factories that are called lights out factories, and the reason is because there is no need for humans in those factories, and so there's no need for lights. Because robots don't need to see, right? So, or if the whole process is automated. So imagine the power savings.
Yeah.
You don't need to be running electricity all the time. So that's where I think there's a huge progress. And the idea of robotics not replacing humans, but enhancing and making more people be able to work collaboratively, right? The notion of cobots or collaborative robots has been around, but I think generative AI can make it more of a reality, and I think that's something that I see in the robotic space. And drones, I think they have so much potential, but then there's also concerns around privacy and so on. But areas where, mining, where there's lives at risks, where you don't want to put people inside. I was talking to someone from the oil and gas industry. They don't want to send humans into certain places. I think those are places where drones can help, right? Even the massive fires that have happened in California, imagine if a drone could do the job of a firefighter, right? That's human life saved. I think those are ways where it actually moves humanity forward, and that's kind of the future I personally envision and expect.
Thank you, Gayathri. Actually, I worked for a drone company previous to Lucid Motors, and that is where the surveillance aspect was so much important for the drones. It was definitely one of the drivers and verticals where the companies are headed towards in AI. But speaking about lights out factories or the future of convergence of AI and robotics, Anshu, the next question for you is how would the convergence of AI and robotics transform smart factories? Do you envision lights out factories from your perspective?
Some point in time. But yes, so automation has a very high bar in manufacturing. And just to roll back several years, I think, I started my career as an AI engineer. And my research was funded by DARPA. I was supposed to recognize plastic explosive in baggages. And this was in the 1990s. And it's a pure classification problem, which we can solve in seconds today. But it was a big problem at that time. How many of you remember Spark workstations? That was my workstation, and I was given that to do this entire problem in real time and train the model. So I would train the models, and this was neural networks. I was training my neural network, working on it, and one month it took to train it. After 1 month, there was a mistake in the model, and that's it. You go back to square one. So I deployed the system in Newark Airport to detect plastic explosive. It did detect. It had a small model. It did detect, but it took 15 minutes to detect with a small model, and 15 minutes, a lot has changed. So it was a concept which was given, that there is importance in this technology, and look how many years it took. This is in 1990s, and it took so many years that it's now things like this is a reality. So manufacturing is a bigger problem because there's the human-like precision that's needed. Tasks like welding, cabling, all of these require human-like precision and human-like adaptability. And you can't say, the robot is going to put a bolt almost there. No, it can't be almost there. It has to be there. So there is a lot of forays have been made, but there's a lot of work to be done. I mean, we invested in a company, Micropsy, which does precisely this. It trains like a human. So it trains on tasks like a human, where with vision, requires adaptability. It changes if there is lighting change, or if there is a movement in the object, it changes. But it will take time to see that convergence, because it is not I come from the software world, so Gen AI has changed the world because you can convert text into instruction, text into code. But for manufacturing, it's not text into code. It's something into geometry, and geometry is so much more difficult. So I do envision lights out factories, but I don't envision lights out factory happening in 5 years. Okay, there's a lot of automation that's going to happen. There is specific tasks that will be automated, but it is going to take time.
Fair enough. I I agree. No, it's been, I hope it's probably maybe the 10 years, maybe not 5 years, we'll see. But moving on here, I'm going to pick up your previous example on putting a detector in at Newark Airport and talk about some nature war and other geopolitical events that continue to happen that affect the supply chain. And Rohini, would love to hear your thoughts on the investments that you are making in the supply chain world, and how do you think supply chain resiliency will change given these investments?
Yeah. No, thank you. I mean, super interesting discussion here. I think this why now question, that came up in the previous panel, I think that has been sort of the thing that has consumed me for a little while on the why now. And then when you start making a list of why now, there's not just one or two, there are probably 20 why nows. There is, of course, the semiconductors are here, the compute capacity is here, the networking bandwidth is here, you've got mobile phones, you've got devices that are available to you, the data is ready. There are many, many technological readiness things that are there. But then there's also a bunch of things about user readiness, like the enterprise adoption of various things are now predicated on what you've already seen in other places. So this example of physics versus data models, the equivalent on the front half of the enterprise would be a pricing exercise. If you want to do a few pricing decisions, you can do it by hand or guess. If you want to do maybe a larger set of pricing decisions, you can use OR type models to do it. But then if you want to do Uber and you want to do essentially pricing at the edge with real-time data, you're going to do it with machine learning, right? And so that progression is happening everywhere. So those analogies exist. And then finally, at kind of the global scale, there is now readiness to rethink your supply chain. So, why do we still run 30-year-old software? You invested in this software, and if this is a cost center, if you don't need to change it, you're not going to go change the thing. So there has to be a push for why do you need to actually use new software, not just the technological readiness, but the user side. And that's kind of where this whole resilience concept comes in. You look at what happened during the pandemic. People have now realized that we've sort of probably eked the last elements out of our old software. You really do need to think about real-time data. And I think there's been huge investments in getting real-time data, which is very important to resilience. Like, the first element of resilience is reactivity, right? You have to have the data to react to things. You have a ship going and colliding with a bridge somewhere, you need to say, okay, what's on that ship? What was in that container? What else can I do? Who do I need to inform? That's part of the resiliency you need to have. The second part of the resiliency is that you essentially don't, it is the geopolitics kind of plays into resiliency. You have various, your supply chains are global, but within those global supply chains, you've now seen, China has, and they have a lock on rare earth materials. They have a lock on certain types of manufacturing capabilities. And so this is the other reason why there is a huge boost to kind of rethinking supply chains, and that's another, and to do that properly and to do a new optimization, you need to have new software to do that. And I think the third big market mover is sustainability. I think people have kind of talked about sustainability and it's been on the wish list, but both in terms of compliance, it's now become a financial element to companies, but then it's also the energy transition sort of feeds into sustainability. So if you're going to go to electrification, you're going to grab some sustainability points against that. So we feel like there is a technological set of why nows, there's the market set of why nows, and then the user adoption set of why nows. That they're all like, it's very exciting because of that. Yeah.
Super exciting, definitely, and so well structured in helping the three pillars out there. I wish I had the access to your brains in the pandemic time frame. Not fun managing supply chain and getting everything on time. Not so structured at all. But moving to the next question, Gayathri, want to challenge a little bit about your jaded Gen AI experience a little bit. Do you see AI as a new third rail? What do you see as opportunities and guardrails that will be required in the supply chain space or manufacturing or smart factory operation space?
No, absolutely. Again, when I say jaded about Gen AI, just to be clear, Gen AI is not a magic pill that's going to solve everything, right? It has its specific use cases. And that's what I was trying to say to. And you asked about AI being a third rail, and I think it is. I think AI is here to stay, and I think it's but what I think everyone needs to focus on, even as startups, as you're building, I was also, listening to some startup pitches yesterday, and they're like, oh, I'm a Gen AI platform. But the question is, what problem are you really solving, right? And without that, it doesn't matter, because yesterday was crypto, today is Gen AI, tomorrow it will be something else. You can't just change your company name based on whatever the hot trend is. It has to be solving a problem that's going to be here to stay, that's going to drive revenue for both you as a company and for your shareholders as investors in the company, right? So with that sort of context in mind, I think AI is going to play a very important role in supply chain. I think the COVID incident was just a wake-up call for everyone about how a lot of the people are thinking about sort of front-end cutting-edge innovation, but you need to think about all the things that have to work, right? I think Rajesh, if I'm not mistaken, was talking about the AWS supply chain, what they're doing. So every piece of that puzzle needs to fit together, not just fit together, but fit together at the right time for you to be able to meet your demand with your customers. Somebody was telling me within Hitachi that they have a, demand, like over-demand problem. And that's actually, you may think it's a good problem to have, but if the customer needs it now, and if you're not able to provide it, then it's lost opportunity, lost business, they may go to somebody else, right? So it's a critical issue. I think supply chain is going to be super important, and I think we have become much more aware of what can happen if we don't have that visibility into supply chain. Every company, and it doesn't, by the way, need to just be manufacturing flows, it's even software. If you think about sort of the executive order that came out, I think in 2021, around cybersecurity, even the software supply chain was called into play there. Because now with the push around open source and so on, how do you know that your software, whatever you source, whether you're putting open source module into your software, how does that impact, your soundness, structural soundness of your software, because these software may be running critical infrastructure, right? So thinking about supply chain from all aspects, and AI is going to be a key enabler in ensuring that you have the right supply to meet your demand, but also making sure that you have early warnings about any discrepancies, right? I mean, semiconductor industry has always seen the swing where you see suddenly like there's, tremendous demand, all the semiconductor companies like stock just soars, and then there's a big drop, because one of the things that they're trying to figure out is customers keep buying and they don't know if they buy and keep or if they buy and use, right? How do you know how your customers are using the product? And whether that's, semiconductor chips or potato chips, they have expiry too. Yeah. So every aspect of it needs to be monitored. And so I think AI is going to play a very important role. It's going to be all types of AI, from computer vision, straight up, reinforcement learning kind of models to Gen AI models. So with that, yeah. I think AI is going to be important.
Very true. Demand perishability, and perishability is...
Yeah, she's a tough audience for Gen AI. Yeah.
But
may I add one thing?
Yeah, please go ahead.
So I would say that with the Gen AI things, I think there are some very interesting use cases that I've sort of started to see, supply chain use cases. Like the most common supply chain question is, where's my stuff? Like there are millions of people whose whole job every day is to figure out where your stuff is. And part of that, part of the answer is usually in structured data. It's in some database, some system where it's supposed to be. This is where your stuff is supposed to be. And then the part of it is in emails or phone calls. When is the truck coming? Are you coming here or not? And I think the Gen AI guys are all over that. Like, so we've probably seen 20 companies doing some version of a mixture of structured data, and then like we've seen somebody who calls on behalf of a dispatcher, and Duplex has gotten good enough that a truck guy will tell you, I'm 10 minutes away, I'm here, and so basically you can automate a bunch of these things that that are human jobs today. The other, maybe in the same vein, I think what Gayathri said about labeling. Labeling is a huge part of it with either images or video. So we had this Women in Supply Chain Summit. We had somebody from Mars who spoke on it, and she was talking about using Gen AI in reverse. So essentially you can say, generate a picture of California poppies against setting sun, and it'll generate that picture. You could use that same technology in reverse to actually recognize the image and label it for you, right? So, and you could do the same thing for object recognition, scene recognition, in any computer vision based factory environment. These are going to be very important tools. And then I'll just give you a third one, which is I've gotten super interested in. One of the areas where Gen AI has been very good is in code generation. So software developers are putting themselves out of business, or just helping themselves and collecting the paychecks. But the code generation is very, very important because you have a ton of old code all across the supply chain. And so we've come across companies that want to take COBOL code and turn it into Python, and it's not just a matter of changing syntax, you actually have to re-architect it. So some of the ideas that are coming up and the companies that are coming up with these Gen AI type use cases across the supply chain has been amazing. But you should have a healthy dose of skepticism that it's not just a relabeled crypto company that turned into.
Perfect. Love it.
Yeah.
Love it, Rohini. Thank you so much for adding that. Anshu, do you want to contribute a little bit towards Gen AI or against it?
I'm a fan of Gen AI, but I totally agree with both Rohini and Gayathri. It is not a solution to every problem. And that's why Gen AI may have pieces of solution in the manufacturing problem, but it is not a total solution for the problem. It is manufacturing, since it's a manufacturing, is a bigger problem to solve. And definitely you should approach with certain level of skepticism, but I think we are just on the ground floor of this AI revolution. There is so much more to come.
Fair.
Just to clear the air, I have invested in 3 generative AI companies, but I look for the problem they solve. And in fact, one of the things that I'll add to the concept of generative AI is also the fact that they are non-deterministic, right? And in a factory floor, you can't have non-deterministic. Oh, this may be right. Well, maybe it's not right. That doesn't work. You don't want your system getting creative and it's building critical stuff. So we have actually invested in AI safety and performance play, which is focused on mitigating hallucinations, areas where it's important, right? Where you want the benefit of generative AI, but provides the guardrails, like you said, right? If you're looking at supply chain, you don't want it coming up with its own stuff, right?
True.
You want to make sure it's
inventory. Yeah.
Correct, exactly. So making sure that there is guardrails around that. So AI is the third rail, but it also needs guardrails. So
imagine welding arm hallucinating.
that's right. No, I don't want to. It's scary.
That would definitely be a little more destructive, right? It is absolutely true. At the end of the day, the hallucination part of it, or how we look at it, it's going to be absolutely impacting the end of the day the product quality that's going to be perceived by all of us as consumers, and it's not going to be fun to have your iPhone with the arm welded somewhere else, right? Not fun. Well, looking at the clock here. Last question, actually, we might be able to get in with Anshu here. How do you see Gen AI or AI transforming the factory floor logistics, warehousing piece of it, specifically on these terms for the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think automation in warehouse, let's talk about lights out automation level, will happen in warehouse much sooner. The reason is the problem is simpler. And we already see, I mean, Amazon, I think Amazon has totally, is ahead of everyone in warehousing. And if we look at Amazon's journey, for instance, I think Amazon acquired Kiva, and that was 2003 company. And Amazon announced Proteus, which is fully automated in 2023. So 20 years. 20 years. But there is a smaller problem. It's sorting, palletizing, and just doing the stuff, and that it doesn't require that kind of precision. So I believe warehousing automation is just possible. What AI has done to warehousing is it will make the cost of hardware cheaper. And the reason I say that is because the same robotic arm that was doing something can be trained to do something else also. So you're not putting specialized hardware for every single task in a warehouse, and that's definitely going to happen. And we've invested in a company which actually does that. It's the same thing. It's sense, think, and act, which one of the speakers mentioned earlier. It does all three. And in warehouse, sense, think, and act is easier, and the think part is AI.
Perfect. Very true. I'm 100% agreeing that warehousing is definitely the path where things would happen, right? It's already measuring the temperature, humidity kind of things long back ago. Turning that into a feedback loop is something that has progressed so much more that we are here. I actually wanted to mention about the drone company that I used to work for, Skydio. We have a solution where we used to go look at, the drones would fly overnight, keep a track of what inventory is, and report it back through the system to the operations or site manager in the morning. So that actually physical inventory counting job was so much more simplified. So warehousing definitely lights out for sure.
Yeah, I think, I mean, one thing to add there is that labor in general has been a huge problem. I think the previous panel, Ala mentioned skills shortages among AI people, but labor shortages are huge all over, all across the supply chain. There are too few truckers, there are too few warehouse workers. So we had a conversation with the CIO of DHL's North America supply chain, and they have all these, they have 10 or 12 priorities on automation. They are pretty far along already on robotic automation. So they'll have like a stretch robot for unloading trucks. And that is not taking somebody's job away. This is sort of a job that nobody wants to do. It's really hard to hire. There's huge churn. Retention is a problem for some of these jobs. So if you can bring in a robot to do that particular job, it's a great place to start. So you can kind of, it is the cobot idea, right? So you do have robots working alongside human beings. And I think that will continue for a while, right? And once that happens, so they have a pathway planning robot, this company called Robust.ai, which works way better than Roomba. Like my Roomba still gets stuck in the same places, but these factory planning ones seem to work much better. And I think kind of thinking through what are the jobs that we don't want people to do in logistics or in the warehouse. It's actually a good place to start on the adoption of robotics.
Great, amazing. Thank you so much. I think hopefully our audience here has had a good chance view into your brains and where the investments are going to happen over the next 5 years and why. But thank you so much for talking about smart supply chain, smart manufacturing, smart factory operations, and thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.